Hello BookTube, my name is Kate and this is my channel, Chaptercviii. I feel like I need to be careful when I say that because every time I listen to a video back, it sounds like I'm saying Chapter K and I'm saying Chapter Kate, so I just don't enunciate that enough. Anyway, today I'm going to be doing my Monsterathon wrap-up. The Monsterathon was a month-long readathon that I did in September that I created and I hosted with several of my friends who I will link in the description of the video, but they were all awesome and I appreciated all of them so much, their support throughout the thing, their, promotion of the readathon, their help with, the Twitter sprints and all that good stuff and bouncing ideas off and things like that. There were several prompts, they were all based around monsters, it was a team-based readathon, I was on Team Beasts, and yeah, so there were a ton of prompts there, but several of my books actually fit multiple challenges, and some of the books actually didn't really fit any of the challenges. Actually, I think they all fit something. Yeah. And like most of my wrap-ups, which I say this, but I haven't done a wrap-up in a while, but like I used to do when I used to do wrap-ups regularly, I'm gonna try and be better about that, but who knows. Empty promises. I like to talk about books in my wrap-ups in order of when I read them, because sometimes I feel like the order in which I read things actually impacts my perception of those things. Like if I read a really good book, and then I read a book that might be like kind of medium, middle of the road for me, I might look at it as being even worse because the book before that was so good. Or I read a really dense book and then I read a really simple book, that could kind of impact the way I sort of perceive and receive that book and story. So here we go. Where is September on my Goodreads? The first book I finished on September 1st was Heroin by Mandy McGinnis. This was actually the August read for my Green Ribbon Book Club, and I didn't finish it until September 1st because I'm just not going to force myself to do things. Even though it's my book club, I'm not going to force myself to do something if I feel like I can't. So, this book is about someone named Mickey, who is like the star catcher for her softball team in high school, but one day Mickey's driving, she gets into a wreck that leaves her with a really bad injury, and they pretty much tell her that she's not going to be ready for conditioning for the next season, but they do give her some pain pills to get through the pain, basically, and she kind of runs through those a lot quicker than she should have, and when they won't give her a new prescription, she starts looking for other avenues to pursue to get that same feeling, and eventually it goes from pain management and just trying to be ready for conditioning to trying to feel good. And it really explores addiction from a lot of different pathways. There's Mickey's story, but there's also other addicts that she, befriends, and there's people that are supplying her. There is a recovering addict in the story as well. There's a lot of different sides to things, which I felt was very tactful, but I was actually really excited to read this because I felt that it would give me some sort of insight into addiction, because like 70% of the patients that I work with have some sort of substance use, and I felt that this would give me some sort of perspective on that, and I definitely think it did. It was a lot. It was very intense, so just know that going into this, and do know that it has graphic depictions of drug use, intravenous drug use. I gave this 4 stars. It was a 4-star book. It was good. I don't know if I would read it again because it's just not really something that I would want to read twice, but it was good. The next book that I read is Beds Are for Flowers, and it's by RK Gold, who is actually on BookTube. You should check him out. He's got a great channel. I actually talked about this book recently. I can't remember what video that was, though. I think it was my Reading My Fears video, actually. But essentially, there's this world where there is very little color. Everything is sort of drained of color in life, and in this world, the people kind of grow old and weary, and before they get too, weak, a reaper actually comes to guide them to the end, and there's kind of this reaper at the gate who, but this book really explores the way you look at death, and I found that really interesting and uncomfortable, but it was beautifully done, and I think it was done in a way that wasn't so menacing. There's also more to it than that. The main character's dad has actually been approached by a reaper multiple times, and so this guy wants to sort of travel to the end and sort of change the way things are, bring more color back into their world. And so if that sounds like your cup of tea, it's on Audible as well as Amazon. I actually listened to the audiobook because Ari provided me with a free Audible code to listen to it, and I really enjoyed it. But that in no way influences my rating of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Tunnel of Bones by V.E. Schwab, Victoria Schwab. I keep doing that. It's a middle grade book, so it's Victoria Schwab. This is the second book in the Cassidy Blake series. Now I'm uncertain. Anyway, it's a sequel to City of Ghosts, and essentially there's a main character named Cassidy Blake. She almost died at one point through drowning in a pond, but was saved by a ghost, and now she can talk to ghosts. She can enter the Vale and go to the other side and talk to ghosts, and she also has a ghost friend named Jacob who, yeah, no one else can see. On top of that, her parents are both ghost hunters. They wrote a book, I think called The Investigators, but now they're filming a TV show, so that provides her with a chance to travel around the world to the most haunted places. Great for someone who can see ghosts and be impacted by ghosts and go to the other side and all that good stuff. But I'm really enjoying the series. Cassidy Blake is such a Gryffindor, and even though I'm not a Gryffindor myself, I feel like they make great protagonists, so it's also a really great idea for a read for October if you want spooky reads, but you're a chicken like I am. And I gave that book 5 stars. The next book is Madman's Daughter by Megan Shepherd. I gave this book 4 stars. This is a retelling of the Island of Dr. Moreau from the point of view of Dr. Moreau's daughter. The Island of Dr. Moreau is by H.G. Wells. It's essentially the same stories in the same time. The only difference is that now he has a daughter and it's told from her perspective. This really feels like a gothic style book. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. The romance in here is very intense and like confusing, and I really enjoyed it though. I will say this is not for you if you don't like gore, but if you like gothic style novels, I think you'll enjoy it. The next book I read was Space Unicorn Blues by T.J. Barrie. Unfortunately, I didn't like this book as much as I hoped I would. I bought this book when I was searching for some weird reads because I really wanted to read some weird stuff. And this book is super, super weird because it's got a lot of these like fantasy elements and really stereotypical, silly fantasy creatures, but they're all in space. And I thought this was going to do it for me, but for some reason it just didn't. I don't know if it's because I listened to this on audiobook or what, but it just didn't quite do it for me. So I actually rated this book 3 stars. It had a lot of these really ridiculous elements, which I was excited about, but then it took itself very seriously. It was kind of like a Firefly-esque style novel, I felt. Like smuggling space people, you know. But then you got like a half unicorn main character. You have this guy named Cowboy Jim. I don't know. There's just a lot of ridiculous elements which makes it fun, but then it takes itself so seriously. It's almost like it doesn't acknowledge how weird it is. I don't know. I just couldn't get into it. And the style of writing I couldn't get into. There wasn't a lot of nuance to it. I don't know if it's because I like atmospheric stories. I don't know if it's because I read it after The Madman's Daughter. I don't know, but it just didn't do it for me. I gave it 3 stars. Which I was also surprised because the ratings are pretty high on Goodreads. I don't know, I missed something. I must have missed something. I was just really disappointed. The next book I read was Welcome to Night Vale by Joseph Fink and Jeffrey Craner. I gave this book 5 stars. This is a really weird book also, but it is done so well that I just enjoyed it. I savored this book. It took me a long time to read because I was just really enjoying it, and like, I read it slowly. Because there's a lot of funny moments in there. While also having some serious moments. So many sirens. If you're a fan of the podcast, I definitely think that you will enjoy this book as well. It's not just a writing of the podcast, it is its own separate story in the town of Night Vale, which is a town in the middle of the desert where a lot of weird junk happens. And it acknowledges, this is something that was different from Space Unicorn Blues, it acknowledges its eccentricities, its weirdness. And I've also read another book, Alice Isn't Dead by Joseph Fink, which is also based on a podcast, but again, separate from just being the podcast. The difference is, with Alice Isn't Dead, I felt like it was like several mini stories rather than one, like, cohesive. The next book that I read is The Binding by Bridget Collins. I vaguely knew what the story was about, but not entirely. This was recommended to me by Noria from Noria Reads. I knew it was book-based magic, and I knew that you could bind memories to books, but I didn't understand exactly what that meant. It's very magical realism because there's not any other magic really, and that is that binders can actually bind memories into a book, and this is something utilized mostly by people who have like a really terrible trauma that they don't feel like they can live with. They might get bound to a book, and that way that memory is stuck in a book and not in their mind anymore. But of course, some people abuse this power. Like people do. People suck. But it's really good. It really got me thinking about memory and trauma and how that works. But basically, there's like two main characters. The first main character, it's from their perspective for the most of the book, and then it switches to the other main character's perspective for like the rest of the book. If you are someone who is sensitive to reading certain topics, I would definitely recommend just being careful. A couple of content warnings for this specific book are rape, infanticide, incest, homophobia. I feel like those are like the main things that I can think of. But like I said, they do bind people who have been traumatized in some way, and they bind those memories to the books. So a lot of terrible things are mentioned or described just because of the nature of that process. The next book I read is essentially a picture book, but it's Fortunately Milk by Neil Gaiman, and it's actually illustrated by Scotty Young, who did the I Hate Fairyland series. He has a super silly and funky style, so there are quite a lot of pictures throughout this book, but it was just something fun that I wanted to read before bed one night, and so it was really good. It's a story of this dad who goes out to get milk, and the kids are waiting for the milk, and it takes a while. So he basically makes up this elaborate story to kind of explain what kept him from getting the milk in a more timely manner. It was just cute. It was a cute little story. Next, I read Cersei by Madeline Miller. This is a reimagining of the life of Cersei. She actually makes a showing in the Odyssey. She is a sorceress. She's pretty awesome. If you like mythology, I do believe you will enjoy this book. I really enjoyed it because I know when I read any type of mythology, I'm like, wow, these like gods are like the worst. They all kind of suck. And she acknowledges that they all kind of suck. Which I enjoy, and I do enjoy how she kind of comes into her power throughout the book. Not only like her actual like magic power, but her own confidence and her own sense of being, and she just takes control of her own life, and I really, really enjoyed that. I gave this book 5 stars. I have not read Song of Achilles, but I am now kind of curious about it, so we'll see. And then the last book that I read was My Favorite Thing is Monsters by Emil Ferris. I gave this 4 stars. This is a graphic novel that looks like it was drawn in like one of those giant like 5-subject notebooks. If you kind of look at it, you can see like it kind of looks like it was drawn in a notebook. I should probably be careful looking through because there is some naked in here. There's a couple of cartoon boobs. This book actually takes place in the 60s. The main character is obsessed with monsters, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on in her life, but a lot of the book is spent with her trying to figure out the case of her neighbor's murder. So it's her trying to sort of weed out the suspects and find out more about her neighbor's life as a child and growing up and things like that. Some of the topics that are covered in this are, I mean, obviously like murder, but also the character who actually died, it goes into her sort of history and growing up during the time of the Holocaust and facing a lot of prejudice based on that and going through a lot of terrible things. This is another one that you want to be careful going into. I definitely recommend it. It's very well done, but there are a lot of like slurs, and there's a lot of prejudice and racism, and there's rape and murder. I already said murder, but there's murder, you know. But I do think it's really well done and very interesting. It wasn't what I expected it to be, but it was good. And then lastly, we have 3 stories out of Unnatural Creatures by Neil Gaiman to read for the readathon. I actually didn't get to the rest of the stories in this book, but the 3 stories I read were so weird and good. There was a story for the Conspiracies team, and the title of it was just a picture of this weird spot. And the story is of this spot that is sort of sentient, and they're trying to sort of figure out what's the deal with the spot. And I don't want to summarize these very much because with a short story, there's only so much I could summarize without like giving away the whole story. The second story was The Griffin and the Minor Canon. This was the story for the Beasts team, and this has a griffin in it who hears stories of a statue of himself. And so he wants to go and fly to this village and see the statue, but everyone's terrified of him because he's a giant griffin and he could eat them. And then the last one was O Come Lady Death, and this was the Haunts read, and it's about this really old lady who throws fabulous parties, and she's always trying to, you know, make her parties more and more interesting. She only has the best people at her parties. And so eventually she starts getting bored of her parties, and she's like, who can I invite to make the party more interesting? So she decides to invite Death. Great idea. All in all, I really enjoyed these 3 stories. I hope to get to the rest of the stories in this book but we'll see. I really do love short story anthologies, so. That was all for my Monsterathon wrap-up. I actually met all of the reading challenges and all the, like, special, like, video challenges because I had to put out the challenge videos, so, like, I had a lot of fun, and I really hope to, try and improve this readathon even more for next year. In the end, I actually ended up terrorizing, because this was how our points were done, I ended up terrorizing 5,308 villagers, so I'm pretty proud of that. I mean, I probably could have done more, but I didn't. That's what I got done, and I had a really good month. And I think I got a lot of books read that I've been really wanting to read for a while, which was the goal, because I realized I had so many monster books, and I really wanted to do a monster readathon at some point, and I finally got it done. I thought about doing it in May, and here we are in September, and it happens. But leave a comment below if you participated or if you might participate next year. I really, really want to do this readathon again. I'm already trying to think of ways to improve it and to make it better and more smooth and make it more interactive. I definitely think next year I'm going to probably try and pre-film all my challenges so they get out in a scheduled kind of manner, and maybe scheduling, you know, Twitter sprints rather than just kind of doing them randomly when we can. But I had a lot of fun. But that is all for this monstrous video, and if you would like more of this junk, subscribe below. Bye!
Tripping over shadows and I'm drowning